Benny froze as she checked her phone at the checkout counter. Card declined. That didn't make sense. She had just been paid last week. Confused, she opened her banking app, and her hands started shaking. Every dollar gone. Her entire savings drained overnight. Then she saw the last transaction. $50,000. Transfer to Grace Obio Family Hospital. Her sister's name. Her mother's signature. In that moment, her breath caught. The woman who raised her had stolen everything she worked for, and didn't even bother to tell her. But what Benny didn't know was that this betrayal would uncover secrets far darker than missing money. Benny stood frozen at the store counter, her heart racing as the cashier repeated the words, "Card declined." It couldn't be true. She had just been paid. She rushed outside, opened her banking app, and felt her stomach drop. Every dollar she had saved for years was gone. Tears filled her eyes as she saw the last transaction. A $50,000 transfer to Grace Obio Family Hospital. Her sister's name glared back at her. Her mother's signature sealed it. Panic turned into anger as she hurried home, desperate for answers. When Benny burst through the door, her mother, Abra, sat at the dining table like nothing had happened. The smell of tea filled the room. Calm and normal. Everything Benny wasn't feeling. She held up her phone, her hands shaking. "Where's my money?" she asked, her voice trembling. Abra didn't flinch. She looked up slowly and said, "Your sister needed surgery. You have money. You'll be fine." Benny's breath caught in her throat. "That was my life savings, Mama. I worked for years for that studio." Her mother sighed like she was tired of explaining. "Family comes first. Farah needed help. You'll survive." For a moment, the silence between them felt heavy enough to crush her. Benny searched her mother's face for any sign of guilt, but there was none. Instead, Abra looked at her like she was being dramatic, like losing everything was nothing compared to Farah's needs. Benny's heart cracked as she realized her mother didn't even see her pain. She tried to explain that this money was her dream, the art studio she had been saving for since college. But Abra only replied, "Dreams can wait, family cannot." Benny felt the room spinning. She had been told all her life to help, to give, to be understanding. But this time, it wasn't just help, it was betrayal. She turned to her mother one last time and whispered, "You didn't ask, you just took." Abra didn't respond. She simply lifted her teacup again and said softly, "You'll thank me one day." Benny walked out of the house in silence, tears streaming down her face. The world outside looked the same, but everything inside her had changed. Her savings were gone. Her trust was gone. And deep down, she knew this wasn't just about money. It was about love that had always been one-sided. That was the day everything disappeared. Benny grew up hearing one name more than her own, Farah. Her sister was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. From the time they were little, their mother treated Farah like a shining star. When new clothes came, Farah got the prettier ones. When there was extra money, it was spent on Farah's school trips and gifts. And when Benny did something right, it was never enough. Her mother would only say, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Those words stayed with her, cutting deeper each time. Farah was beautiful, loud, and loved by everyone. Benny was quiet, thoughtful, and hardworking. She was the one who helped with chores, stayed up late studying, and took part-time jobs just to ease the family's burden. But no one ever noticed. Her mother's praise always went to Farah, the perfect daughter. When Farah failed at something, it was called a mistake. When Benny made the smallest error, it was a disappointment. Even as adults, nothing changed. The family still revolved around Farah, and Benny was just the shadow in the background. When Benny discovered her savings had been stolen, she thought maybe, just maybe, her mother would feel sorry. But instead, she was met with cold eyes and cruel words. Her mother said she was being selfish, that she should be proud her money helped her sister live. Farah even called her ungrateful, saying, "You should be happy to do something good for once." That sentence broke something inside Benny. How could they take everything from her and still make her feel guilty for being hurt? It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about years of being unseen. Benny realized she had spent her whole life trying to earn love that was never meant for her. Her mother only saw her as a resource, not a daughter. Her sister saw her as a backup plan, someone to fix things when life went wrong. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She had always been the scapegoat, the one who carried everyone's blame while Farah wore the crown. Sitting alone that night, Benny whispered to herself, "They'll never see me until I stop being their shadow." And for the first time, she stopped crying. The pain was still there, but so was something new. A quiet strength that told her this was not the end of her story. Benny spent days calling the bank, hoping there had been some kind of mistake, maybe a hacker, maybe a system error, anything but what she feared. But every call ended the same. The money was gone, and the transaction was legitimate. The bank officer asked her to come in with identification to review the transfer details. She rushed there, her heart heavy but still clinging to a little hope that her mother's signature was forged, that it wasn't true betrayal. Sitting across the banker, Benny's hands trembled as she watched him pull up her file. He turned the screen toward her. There it was, her name and her mother's name, side by side, on a joint account she had never even seen before. Her breath caught. "That can't be right," she whispered. But the banker explained that her mother had opened the account years ago, using Benny's information, and made her a co-signer. "It was registered as an emergency fund," he said. Her chest tightened. All this time, she had been saving money into an account her mother secretly controlled. The banker showed her the authorization papers. Her mother had full access, and the last transaction, the one that took everything, was signed by her mother's hand. No fraud, no error, just betrayal. Benny stared at the screen, numb. Her mother had planned this all along. It wasn't a desperate act to save Farah. It was control. Quiet, calculated control over her life, her choices, her dreams. As she walked out of the bank, her knees felt weak. She sat on the nearest bench, scrolling through the screenshots she had taken of the statements. Each one reminded her how much her mother had taken. Not just her money, but her trust. The woman she had respected, defended, and loved more than anyone had built a trap years ago, one disguised as protection. Memories flooded her mind. Her mother insisting on handling her paychecks, telling her, "I'll keep it safe for you." Her mother always asking how much she earned, always reminding her, family should share everything. Benny now understood it was never about sharing, it was about control. Her savings had been watched, her life decisions guided, her independence quietly taken from her. That night, Benny sat in her studio surrounded by her unfinished paintings. For the first time she didn't cry. She just stared at the blank canvas, realizing her mother had drawn her life the way she wanted, and now it was time for Benny to take back the brush. She whispered to herself, "This ends with me." Benny thought things couldn't get worse, but they did. One morning, her phone began buzzing nonstop. Messages, tags, and screenshots filled her notifications. When she finally opened them, her heart sank. It was a post from Farah, a long, emotional story about her miracle surgery. Farah had written, "I wouldn't be alive today without my loving family who sacrificed everything for me. My mother is my hero." Beneath it was a picture of Farah smiling in a hospital gown, with Abra beside her holding her hand. Thousands of people liked and shared the post. Comments poured in. "Such a wonderful family. Your mother is an angel. Benny must be so proud to have a mom like that." Benny stared at the screen, shaking her head in disbelief. Not once did Farah mention her. Not once did she say whose money paid for the surgery. The entire internet believed the story of a perfect family, while the real truth left Benny empty and alone. Within days, the post went viral in their town. Neighbors called, relatives sent messages, and everyone praised Abra for her selfless love. But for Benny it was humiliation. She couldn't correct the story without looking bitter. If she told the truth, they'd call her jealous. So she stayed quiet, swallowing the pain as her mother and sister basked in the attention. At work, things began to fall apart too. Her boss had seen the viral post and assumed Benny's family was wealthy. He cut her hours saying, "You'll be fine, your family looks well off." Her paycheck shrank just as her bills grew. Rent, utilities, and debt piled up. Every night, she sat in her tiny apartment, staring at unpaid notices scattered across the table. She had worked for years to build her life, and now it was slipping through her fingers because of lies. Then came the eviction letter. She read it over and over, feeling the weight of every word. The same family who stole her savings was now being celebrated by the world. No one knew the truth. No one saw the girl behind the miracle. One evening, She saw another post from Farah, a photo of her new engagement ring with the caption, "When God restores, he does it completely." Benny put down her phone and whispered, "He restores but not to thieves." For the first time, anger burned stronger than her pain. She decided she wouldn't stay silent forever. That night, Benny sat alone in a small cafe near her apartment. Her clothes smelled of paint, her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands trembled as she stirred her untouched coffee. The world around her moved normally, laughter, chatter, music, but she felt invisible. All she could think about was how everything she built had been taken from her by the people she loved most. When the waiter came to collect her cup, she whispered, "Please just leave it." Her voice cracked. At the next table, a woman had been quietly observing her. After a while, she stood and walked over. She was in her mid-30s, dressed neatly but with kind eyes that carried their own share of stories. "You look like you're fighting invisible wars," she said softly. Benny looked up, startled. For a moment, she wanted to hide her face, but the woman's voice was calm and sincere. "I'm Adira," she said, sitting across from her. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to." Benny hesitated, but the words started pouring out, about her stolen savings, her mother's betrayal, her sister's lies, and the loneliness that followed. Adira listened without interrupting, her expression gentle but firm. When Benny finally stopped, wiping her tears with a napkin, Adira said quietly, "I'm a lawyer, and what your mother did isn't just unfair, it's illegal." Benny froze. She had never even thought of it that way. Adira explained that joint accounts still required mutual consent for large transfers, and that Benny had the right to demand investigation and restitution. But as soon as Adira mentioned legal action, Benny shook her head. "I can't," she said. "She's my mother. People will say I'm heartless." Adira leaned forward, her eyes kind but steady. "Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean revenge," she said. "It means recovery. It means saying, 'You can't keep hurting me,' and call it love." Those words stayed in Benny's mind long after Adira left her card on the table and walked away. When Benny got home, she sat on her bed, holding that card in her hand. She thought about her life, how many times she had been told to forgive, to endure, to stay quiet. Maybe silence had protected everyone else, but it had destroyed her. That night, she whispered to herself, "Maybe recovery is what I need." It was the first time she began to see a way out of her pain, not through anger, but through courage. Benny went back to her family's house one last time, hoping they would understand how deeply they had hurt her. She didn't want to fight. She just wanted them to admit it was wrong, to say they were sorry. When she walked in, Farah was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Abra was in the kitchen, humming softly. For a moment it almost felt normal, like old times. But when Benny spoke, the warmth vanished. "Mama, I just want to talk," she said quietly. "You took everything I had. That money was my future. Can't you see what that did to me?" Abra didn't even look up. "We saved your sister's life," she replied coldly. "You should be proud." Farah laughed under her breath. "Proud? Benny repeated. You didn't ask me, you didn't tell me, you just took it." Farah turned toward her and said sharply, "You're jealous. Admit it. You've always hated that I'm the one everyone loves. You just wanted me to die so you could finally be noticed." The words hit Benny like a slap. She stood frozen, staring at the sister she had once defended against bullies, the sister she had worked extra shifts for. Her mother stepped in, her tone even harsher. "You owe us gratitude, Benny. Without you, Farah wouldn't be alive. You should be thanking me for what I did." Benny felt her throat tighten. Gratitude? For stealing her dreams? For leaving her broke and humiliated? She looked at both of them and realized there was no point explaining anymore. They didn't see her pain. They only saw what they could take from her. She quietly walked to her old room, gathered a few clothes, her sketchbook, and a small box of paints. As she passed her mother, Abra muttered, "One day, you'll regret walking away." Benny stopped for a moment, then said softly, "I already regret staying this long." That night, she went to her small art studio, the one she had been saving to open properly one day. It was dusty and cramped, but it was hers. She laid a blanket on the floor and stared at the half-finished canvases leaning against the wall. The silence felt heavy, but peaceful. For the first time, she wasn't surrounded by judgment or cruelty, only her own thoughts. And somewhere deep inside, she felt something she hadn't in months: determination. She whispered to herself, "They took my savings but not my soul." That night, Benny promised she would rebuild her life, and this time, it would be on her own terms. Benny woke up early each morning in her tiny art studio, where the floor was her bed and the walls were covered with half-finished paintings. For days, she stared at her brushes but couldn't bring herself to paint. Everything inside her felt heavy: anger, sadness, disappointment. But one night, she picked up her brush again. Not to make something beautiful, but to let the pain out. She painted trembling hands reaching for something they could never return. She painted eyes filled with both love and betrayal. Each stroke carried the weight of everything she had been through. Soon one painting turned into 2, then 3, then 10. She called the series "The Hands That Took, the Heart That Stayed." It told her story without words: how love can hurt, how forgiveness can still exist after destruction. When Adira came by to visit, she was stunned. "These aren't just paintings, Benny," she said. "They're your voice." Adira convinced her to put the paintings online. Benny hesitated at first, embarrassed to share her pain with the world. But she agreed, trusting Adira's encouragement. Within days, messages started coming in. People she didn't know wrote about how her art touched their hearts. Some said her paintings felt like their own stories of betrayal, survival, and healing. Her small online page began to grow, and for the first time, her name appeared beside words like inspiring and brave. She sold her first painting to a woman who said, "It feels like this painting understands me." Benny cried that night, not from sadness but relief. Adira helped her organize a small exhibition at a local gallery. Benny was nervous when the day came. She stood quietly in a corner as visitors walked through the room, stopping in front of her paintings with tears in their eyes. A journalist asked her, "What inspired this collection?" Benny smiled softly and said, "Pain, but I turned it into purpose." By the end of the month, every single piece in her collection had been sold. Her name appeared in local news headlines as a rising artist. For years, she had been invisible, living in the shadow of others. But now her story, her truth, was shining through colors and canvases. She finally understood that what broke her didn't end her. It built her. And this time no one could take that away. As Benny's paintings gained attention, her story quietly began to spread too. Adira, who had been helping her legally, decided it was time to file a notice for restitution. Not to humiliate anyone, but to recover what was rightfully Benny's. The document was meant to stay private, but someone from the court leaked it to the press. Within days, the headline appeared everywhere: "Mother Steals Daughter's Savings to Save Favorite Child." At first, Benny felt sick seeing it. She never wanted her family's shame to become public. But the internet had its own way of handling the truth. People began digging deeper, connecting the viral post Farah had made months earlier about her miracle surgery to this new revelation. Suddenly, everyone realized the truth. The surgery had been funded by theft, not sacrifice. Comments flooded in. So the loving family was a lie? How could a mother do this to her own child? Abra and Farah's world started to fall apart overnight. The hospital that once praised them for their family bond deleted their posts. Donations that once poured in stopped completely. People unfollowed Farah, calling her a liar and a manipulator. Her carefully built image of a kind, humble survivor was destroyed. Then came the worst blow. Farah's fiancé, who had proudly stood by her side through her recovery, called off the engagement. He released a short statement saying he couldn't marry someone who had built her life on deceit. Farah begged him to stay, insisting she didn't know the money was stolen, but no one believed her. Even her friends began to distance themselves. As for Abra, she faced constant shame in public. Neighbors whispered when she passed by. Relatives stopped answering her calls. The woman who once walked proudly, showing off her perfect daughters, now avoided stepping out of her house. She tried to contact Benny, sending long messages about how the world misunderstood her, but Benny didn't respond. She wasn't cruel, she was simply done. Meanwhile, Benny's art continued to grow. News outlets wanted to feature her not just as an artist, but as a story of survival. She never spoke badly about her family. She only said, "Sometimes losing everything gives you the chance to rebuild honestly." That calm strength made people admire her even more. While Abra and Farah's names faded in shame, Benny's name began to shine, not out of revenge, but because truth has a way of finding its light. Benny was invited to a popular talk show that celebrated people who turned pain into strength. She almost said no, afraid of reopening old wounds, but Adira encouraged her to go. "Tell your story, Benny," she said softly. "Not for revenge, for freedom." So, with quiet courage, Benny appeared on stage, surrounded by bright lights and curious faces. The host began asking her about her art, her struggles, and how she managed to forgive life for what it had taken from her. Benny spoke gently, sharing how she once trusted the wrong people, and how painting helped her heal. The audience listened in silence, some moved to tears. But suddenly, the calm atmosphere shattered. The studio doors opened, and to everyone's shock, Abra and Farah walked in uninvited. The host froze. The audience gasped. Benny's eyes widened for a second, but she didn't flinch. Her mother walked straight to the stage, pretending to wipe tears. "Please," Abra began, her voice trembling. "I'm a mother. I made mistakes, but I did it out of love. A mother can do anything for her child." The cameras zoomed in. The tension was thick. For years, Abra had controlled the story, but now, the world was watching her try to rewrite it. Farah stood beside her, looking lost and ashamed. She whispered, "Mom, please stop." But Abra continued, desperate for sympathy. "I didn't mean to hurt Benny. I was just trying to save her sister's life. Wouldn't any mother do the same?" Benny took a deep breath. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't rise. She simply looked at her mother and said, "You didn't save a child. You destroyed one. You just chose which one mattered more." The studio went silent. Even the host didn't know what to say. Farah covered her face and began to cry quietly. Abra froze, realizing the truth she had avoided for years had finally been spoken out loud, and on live television. The next day, that short clip spread across every social media platform. Millions watched, sharing comments like, "That sentence broke me," and "She spoke for every child who was never chosen." Within hours, Benny's calm, honest words became a symbol of strength and truth. While Abra and Farah disappeared from the spotlight, Benny's message kept echoing everywhere. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply telling the truth, and doing it with grace. A year passed, and Benny's life had transformed completely. What once began as pain had now become purpose. She opened her own art foundation for young women, calling it New Canvas. The name came from her belief that everyone deserves a fresh start, a chance to paint their life again, no matter how many times it has been ruined. On the opening night, the exhibition hall glowed with soft golden lights. Paintings filled the walls, each telling a story of healing, hope, and rebirth. Young women stood beside their artwork, smiling proudly. Cameras flashed. People whispered her name with admiration. Benny, the artist who turned betrayal into beauty. As she walked through the crowd, Benny felt a warmth in her chest. This time it wasn't pain or sadness, it was peace. She saw Adira in the corner, smiling proudly. Without Adira's kindness that night in the cafe, Benny knew she might never have found the strength to stand here today. During the event, a reporter approached her with a gentle smile and asked, "Benny, everyone knows your story. The world watched what happened. Tell us, have you forgiven your mother?" Benny paused, her eyes soft but steady. Then she smiled, not out of bitterness, but wisdom. "Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in," she said calmly. "It's about freeing yourself so they can't hurt you again." Her words hung in the air, powerful and real. The audience clapped quietly, some wiping away tears. Behind her, at the center of the exhibition, hung her latest painting, a breathtaking piece of a young girl holding a broken card close to her chest. The title read, "Declined but not defeated." It was more than art, it was her story, her entire journey captured in color. The broken card represented the betrayal, the decline she once faced, but the light around the girl's face showed something stronger, the courage to rise again. As applause filled the hall, Benny took one last look around. She thought of her past, the nights in the art studio when she slept beside unfinished canvases, the tears, the rejection, and the loneliness. And then, she realized something powerful. She hadn't really lost everything. She had simply been pushed toward the life that was always meant to be hers. The audience stood, clapping louder now, as Benny whispered under her breath, "Declined, but not defeated."